So I'm going to have you go to John, Gospel of John, chapter 1. I'm going to spend a few weeks in this chapter. This is one of my favorite chapters in all the Bible, and it's a chapter that's about Christmas, really what Christmas represents, the coming of Christ into this world. But unlike Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this gospel focuses on the coming of Christ into the world in kind of a theological way, maybe not as much a historical way, but more theological in terms of what that means. What does it mean that Jesus came into the world? What's it say about God's character? What's it say about what God was up to in the world through the coming of Christ? So we're going to talk about John chapter 1 for a few weeks, and I'm calling the series God Down Here. This is for you, Don, mainly. We have this inside joke about the phrase down here, which at one point, eons ago, Don said, "You say down here a lot." And I said, "No, I don't." And I was editing a message and realized, wow, yeah, I say down here a lot. So I was thinking about Christmas and how it has to do with God down here in the person of Jesus, him coming into this world. And I thought that was appropriate for what we're going to be talking about. Now let's start with John 1, all right? So I'm going to read verses 1 through 5 and then 9 through 14. So just two little sections here in John 1. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it." And then jump down to verse 9. "There was the true light, which coming into the world enlightens every man. He was in the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and those who were his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God." And then this last verse, and this is the verse we're going to highlight this morning, verse 14, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we saw his glory, glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth." So this section is all about really what Christmas is all about, the coming of Jesus into this world. Jesus, the Word, another name for Christ. Jesus, the Word, coming into this world, dwelling among us. I love Christmas. I've told you that before. Year after year, we talk about Christmas themes, and I do. Ever since I was a kid, I've loved it. Most of you probably love it, unless you've had some real hardships in your life that have soured it for you. Most people love it. Love the music, the lights, the decorations, the Christmas cookies, the whole business, right? Love it. And there's a lot of enjoyable, fantastic parts of the season. This passage here kind of acquaints us with the darker side of Christmas in a way. And I think for us to really appreciate what it means that God came into this world through Jesus, we got to be willing to look at the darker side. We've got to be willing to look at the brokenness of this world, and not just the brokenness of this world generally, but the brokenness of our own hearts and minds, our desperate need for God. We have to consider that to really appreciate the significance of God entering into our world, coming to rescue us personally. So the other day I got a text message from a friend who was kind of bemoaning the conflict that has erupted in his family, and it was related to Thanksgiving. And so he sends me this viral video that's been going around. I don't know if it was filmed this year or years ago. I don't know, but it was a Thanksgiving meal, someone's dining room, long table, a bunch of people sitting there. And when the video begins, two people are already in this conflict across the table from one another. And this is not some production. Like, this is someone grabbed their cell phone and literally filmed a squabble going on at their Thanksgiving table. And there's two guys getting into it, an older guy and a younger guy. And the older guy is standing up at this point across the table from the younger guy saying, "Hey, you don't act like part of this family. So if you're not going to act respectably, then you need to be out of this family. And the young kid is giving him lip back. He's not a kid, I should say. He's like a young man, probably in his early 20s or something. He's giving him lip back and said, "You really going to make a scene at Thanksgiving?" And unbeknownst to them, someone is, again, sitting there filming it on their cell phone. The older guy takes a roll out of the basket of rolls in front of him and throws the roll at the young guy. It says, if you're not going to act like part of this family, then you need to get out. And the younger guy stands up and he starts to, again, proceed to mouth off more to the older guy. And then more things are said. And then the young guy literally picks up the table on his side and flips it over. And everything that was on the table is now on the floor, including the entire turkey that was there. The older guy proceeds to pick up said turkey of looked like 16 pounds or so and throw it at the younger guy. And he's like, "Do you really just throw a turkey at me?" Which is hard not to laugh. It's like, if you can't laugh, folks, you just cry. So you got to laugh about stuff like that. So he threw the turkey at him, at which point the younger guy goes and flips over other tables. And then there's one remaining table with a bunch of, looks like the dessert table with pies on it. So he starts picking up pies and throwing them at the older guy while yelling expletives at him, which is why I'm not showing the video in here this morning. That was someone's real Thanksgiving. The last part of the video is the young guy realizing that it's being filmed. So he turns to the person filming. "Are you really filming? Oh, great Thanksgiving video." And then he storms off. It's sad. I get it. I had to laugh. And for one thing, a guy's throwing a turkey at someone. That's kind of funny. If you can't see the humor in that, I don't know. But it really is sad, isn't it? And that's not, unfortunately, that uncommon. So why do I tell you a dismal story like that on the beginning of our Christmas season sermon series here? I guess two reasons. One, if nobody threw a turkey at your Thanksgiving table last Thursday, it's something to be thankful for. And secondly, I want you to think with me about what we human beings can be like sometimes. We're not all that civilized. Deep down, by nature, we are savages, fighters. It's reality. It's the truth. It's the world Jesus came into. He dwelt among us. He dwelt with people like us. And we can hear a story like that or see that video and say, "Gosh, that's just kind of appalling and horrible." But I want you to think about this with me, all right? What if the last time you threw a fit, and even you and adults in here can throw a fit sometimes, the last time you lost your temper, what if somebody was sitting there with a cell phone and caught that on video? And then you saw the video of it. And you saw the look in your eyes. You heard the tone of your voice. Observed your body language. What would you think of you if you saw it? What would you think? When Jesus came into the world, he came into the world fully informed as to what people are really like. He knows exactly what we're really like and what we're capable of. He knew, it says, what was in man. And he knew that the picture isn't pretty. And while often, because of God's common grace, we can get along and have a good time, and that's all fantastic. And there are many gifts of the season that also point us to God. But I mean, really to appreciate him coming and the lowly way in which he came and what he endured when he came and how his life ended on the cross. If for us to really appreciate that, we have to be honest about the nature of mankind, what we are like, to realize how significant it is that he would come. I mean, you ever watching a movie and maybe you've seen it before, or you just figure things out and you know what's going on, and you know the good guys are about to go into a situation in which it's a trap or they're about to be ambushed, and you know it, and you're thinking, what are you doing? Don't go in that room. Don't go to that place. Because you know what's going to happen. And you're thinking, if I was that person, I wouldn't go in there. I wouldn't put myself in that situation. Jesus knew exactly what he was getting himself into. Exactly what he was getting himself into. The light came into the world of darkness. So, John 1, verse 14. Really, one key word here that to me is huge, and it fits perfectly what we've been seeing in the book of Exodus, in our study of Exodus. It says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That word dwelt, you don't see it in a lot of English translations, but it's the word tented. Jesus tented among us. I mean, literally, it's the noun form is the word tent, and it's the verb form of tenting. Okay, he was tenting with his people. Okay, so you go back to Exodus and the tabernacle. What's a tabernacle? It's a tent, and that same term is used back there in the Old Testament to describe God dwelling among his people. And you remember the situation before God rescued them. They were in Egypt. They were, for many generations, under the pharaohs. They were prospering. They were in Goshen, the special area there within Egypt where they were flourishing. Their crops were doing well. Their animals were doing well. They were marrying one another and having children and raising children. They're doing great until it tells us in Exodus 1, a Pharaoh arose who did not remember Joseph nor the heritage of the Israelites, and he began to resent them and fear them. And so what did he do? He enslaved them. He put them to forced labor. He oppressed them. He beat them down to keep them weak, to protect himself and his leadership and his power hold on the area there, right? And so then the Israelites find themselves stuck. And while things were going well and they were fat and happy, I'm sure from their perspective, God probably seemed, millions of miles away. It's not even really a concern at that point because by and large, things are good. I'm sure they still had their squabbles and things going on in their society, but overall, they're flourishing, they're doing well, and God is, by all appearances, not even involved at all. No direct contact whatsoever. Until that Pharaoh rises up, starts oppressing them, they're suffering, and that goes on for a while, and they start crying out to God for help. Remember the story? And so God sends Moses to go and to begin to deliver them from Egyptian bondage. God intervenes. He inserts himself. He makes it clear that he's always been there. He's known all about what's happening. He sees them. He hears them. He knows everything that's going on, and he's attentive to their need, the plight that they found themselves in. He was attentive to it. And so Moses comes and begins the Exodus, all right, the escape from Egypt. And then after the plagues and the Passover and the Red Sea, and God destroys the Egyptian army, and now you get the Israelites on the other side, and they're in the wilderness, and they're at first really excited about being free from Egypt, but then quickly they discover there's not a whole lot in terms of resources there in the wilderness, and so they begin to fear and struggle and strive, and it's a big mess again. But God is with them, and he makes it clear that he's with them. And there's a variety of ways that he does this. He speaks to them through Moses, but he shows up also. He literally comes down, okay? He comes down, and where's the first setting? Well, the first setting is Mount Sinai. He shows up on the mountaintop with Moses, and he's communicating and saying, hey, convey this to the people. But then he gets even closer because he says, I want you to build this tabernacle, and I want you to place the tabernacle right there in the middle of the campsite. So you get all their tents and all these hundreds of thousands of Israelites living around, and God is smack dab in the middle, represented there in the tabernacle. That's the representation of his presence. And we said that the tabernacle represents God's desire, God's pleasure to dwell with his people. And so you look at the tabernacle like we did in great detail and all the furnishings of it. And it looks like a house. It's got lights and tables and altars and washing areas and all that. It makes you think of a dwelling place. And this is God saying, look, I'm dwelling with you. I'm with you. And you fast forward, and they build this permanent structure of the temple when they have their kingdom there in Israel. And then later on, through conflicts with other nations, the temple's destroyed and rebuilt. And that is repeated throughout certain ways. And then you come to the period of the Gospels, the New Testament period, when Jesus is born into this world. And his other name, Emmanuel, which means what? God with us. And you have it saying here in John 1:14, the Word became flesh and tented among us, lived with us. God who sees us as we are, who knows us better than we know ourselves, knows what we're capable of, who knows that underneath it all is this struggle for sovereignty, that all of us want to be bigger than we are. We want to have more power and more influence than we have. This is interesting. I was watching a documentary series on Netflix called Toys. Have you seen that? Where they talk about different toys of like the 80s, which was when I grew up. And they have different episodes on like the different toys that were popular. And I had most of them. I mean, it was like He-Man, Transformers, G.I. Joes, and it gives the history of how those toys were invented. It's fascinating. And takes you back, and it's fun. And one of them, one episode was about He-Man. Remember He-Man? And they go into there how they came up with the idea for He-Man. They took a bunch of young boys and interviewed them and just watched them play. And they tried to figure out what makes young boys tick. What do young boys want? And one of the recurring themes there with all those young boys was how they want power and strength. And they thought, man, G.I. Joe's cool and the Star Wars action, they're cool, but they're all kind of scrawny and they're not all that impressive looking. So we need to make this huge, muscular, sort of barbarian looking guy. And then they said, now how do we really connect it with what little boys want? And they detected that when these boys are playing, this word keeps coming up, power. Boys are obsessed with power. And so remember He-Man's phrase? Who remembers? He holds up the big sword. What is it, Malia? I have the power, right? He goes from Prince Adam, who wears like a pink, weird kind of thing, to now he's like this manly, hulking He-Man guy, right? It's marketing brilliance. And for years, they made millions of dollars selling these little bulked up little, and I had a whole bunch of them. He-Man. I have the power. That's what's happening. And here's the problem is that every other person of the 7 billion people in the world, they're thinking the same way. We'll all be fine and good if we were by ourselves, maybe, and we didn't have elements in an environment that we couldn't control. That's kind of a hassle too sometimes. But the clashing that goes on. This is what life is like. This is what people are like. This is the world Christ came into. And I don't know what the background was. Doesn't matter. Of that story I told you earlier, the video of the two people fighting over Thanksgiving dinner, doesn't even matter. What really matters is there's a struggle for power there. There's sin there. There's judgmentalism there. There's self-righteousness there. There's hatred there. There's warfare there. And underneath it all is two human beings who have an elevated sense, as you said in Sunday school this morning, Don, elevated sense of their own importance. And welcome to earth. And it all begins with our rebellion against our Maker, who really does have all the power. The real authority, the real one who is omniscient and omnipotent and omnipresent, all those things, God. And we have this underlying problem with him, and it is the root cause of all of our other problems. And instead of handing us over, he dwelled with us. Remember the story? Jesus is traveling along, and he's got James and John with him. Remember? And they are wanting to go to Jerusalem. They're going to go through Samaria, and they want to kind of have a little time in Samaria. But the people of Samaria rejected Jesus. I mean, the audacity, right? The Son of God is there. You're these kind of outcast Samaritans. Son of God's willing to come and spend a little time with you, and you reject him. And so you know what James and John's response was? You remember? This is why they're called the sons of thunder. They said, you know what? Hey, Jesus, do you want us to call? Hey, I got an idea. In terms of coming down into this world, I got a way you can come down. Why don't you call down fire from heaven and consume these people? That was James and John's idea. And it sounds like a fairly reasonable idea to me. You remember what Jesus said? Hey, great idea, guys. Let's do it. Is that what he did? Those are my sound effects. I'm tapping into my childhood here, guys, for you. He rebuked them and he said, you don't know what spirit you're of. I didn't come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. He came to rescue people like the Samaritans and people like you, James and John. They came to rescue you. Came to deliver you, not to destroy you. So it's this amazing concept of God down here, in the reality of the down here. This is a little different this morning. I got all sorts of these little kind of, what are to me good illustrations. I'm sitting there working on this the other day, okay, and it's a sunny day, and this beam of sunlight is right on my desk, literally on the piece of paper that I'm writing on as I'm thinking through these things. And I thought to myself, that's fascinating. The sun, and I couldn't remember, so I had my computer right in front. I looked it up. The sun is 93 million miles from the earth. That's pretty far. Sun is 93 million miles away. And I'm sitting there at my desk working, and the ray of light from that sun that's that far away is right there on my piece of paper in this world, down here. And this says here in John 1 that when Jesus came into the world, light came into the world. God, he's omnipresent, so there's a little bit of a technicality, but we can think of it as God literally came into the world of creation, becomes a flesh and blood human being. And when he's there, it says he is there as light. He is there to shine as light. And the darkness, it says in verse 5, doesn't comprehend it. And depending on your translation, might say something different, but it has to do with this idea, grasping it. And so it can either literal or figurative. It seems like it's figurative here, like darkness doesn't quite get it. So that's why it says later, he came to his own, and his own received him not. In and of ourselves, it's kind of like we're just going along with the narrative of our own mind and what we think is important and how we understand life and what we're after, what our goals are. We're just kind of going about our business, and in the fray of conflict that's perpetual and all that, but it's just kind of like doing our thing, and God shines into the world. He just comes down in that sense, and he's here. And you might think, logically speaking, wow, they should have, if they were in touch with anything regarding reality, they should have welcomed him and say, thank God you're here. We need your help. But it says he came to his own received him not. It's not really important. We don't really need him. Or if we need him, we need him to take care of the bad people. That's James and John's approach. That's the whole reason the Israelites rejected Jesus. Well, he's not the kind of king that we really want. But he came to do to people what I just did to you a few minutes ago when I said, hey, picture yourself on video, pitching a fit, look in your eyes, hear the tone of your voice, observe your body language, see yourself for who you are apart from God's rescuing grace, and say, he came for you. You wouldn't even come for you. You'd be appalled by what you saw if you watched a video of yourself at your worst moments. You'd be sickened by it. You'd be humiliated. You certainly wouldn't want anyone else seeing it. God sees you. The brokenness of who you are because of all that rebellious lies that just perverts and twists and distorts who he made, the good of who he made you to be, how it's all just twisted and broken and ugly because of sin. And he just says, I love you. I'm coming for you. I'm coming to rescue you. I'm coming to save you from you. That's what Christmas is all about. I mean, why did he come the way he came? Why didn't he come in some impressive, grandiose way? He comes as a little baby, and he's rejected even there, and he's thrown in a stable, a manger, a feeding trough. It's his first accommodations here. And welcome to earth, God. We'll stick you in a feeding trough for animals. It says something. Like, we don't get it, naturally speaking. And something in us doesn't want to get it. I don't want to think that it's that bad. I don't want to think that I'm that bad by nature and that you guys are. I like nice people and nice things. I even like, this is a true confession for some of us who've been talking about this. Look, part of me, I really like Hallmark movies. We've had this ongoing conversation with my father-in-law and some other friends here at the church. We have this kind of thing where we joke about, I'm not going to say who does. Some people really like them. Some people don't. I'm more on the side of people who don't. But I'm just going to be honest. So this is disclosure here. I've never admitted. I kind of like them. I like the warm, cozy flannel shirt wearing stuff, all that. It's all nice. I do. Yeah. I'm not going to I could keep talking. I'm not going to. Jesus didn't come into the world for Hallmark movie characters. He came into the world for ugly, depraved, wretched sinners like us and say, well, it's not that bad. Okay, maybe it's not that bad. You don't think so. At some point, circumstances might show you that it is. And here's what that does, okay? So Jill and I had this ongoing conversation. I'm going to kind of bring it together here. I have been called a pessimist. I like the word realist better. I'm coming to terms with that. And I think here's what's interesting. I think what makes a pessimist tick, if you want to know, if you're interested at all, and for those of you pessimists out there, maybe you've already thought through this yourself, really we're idealists, which is the part of me that loves Hallmark movies. Happy endings and romance and smiles and laughter and nobody throwing turkeys at each other. We're idealists who just look around and say, but it's not what it could be. I mean, if I wasn't a pastor, I could be like a quality control person. I could go into like a restaurant and right away see what's not right. Dust in the corner, a little crack on the floorboard. I mean, right away, boom. It's like some gift that I have. Just laser, boom. I could see it, all the flaws, man. But I want it to be better. I want it to be good. I want it to be perfect. I want it to be nice and ornate, beautiful, and magnificent and impressive. And the food needs to taste, 5-star, delicious. I love that stuff. I love it. And when it's not that, something's like wrong, like the force is out of balance in my universe. And I think part of what makes life hard when you have this like pessimistic, it's because you see what it could be and it's just not. So you're frustrated constantly by what it's not. Whereas an optimist might not be apt to see those flaws as clearly or whatever. Okay. But here's the irony, at least for God's redemption of a pessimist like me, all right, is that if you can let that be flipped upside down, if you can listen to when God says in Romans 3 that there's none good, not even one, that the poison of vipers is on our lips constantly, that we are quick to shed blood, that we hate other people really, that we don't see our God for who he is, and we frankly got a big problem with him, and that's really why we have all these other fights and squabbles and all the friction and all the stuff that ruins a holiday season, for example. Why? It all comes from that same depraved just mess that it is, okay? And if you can just see that for what it is and listen to God who says, look, it really is like that, here's the irony. Is that when he opens your eyes to see who he is and what his heart is like for fallen, broken people, for rebels, what he's up to in this world, redemption and love and mercy and covering the shame and washing it away and saying, unlike that guy in the video, if you can't shape up, you gotta be part of our family. God who says, look, you're part of my family. You just are, no matter what, regardless of your behavior, you're in. You're not getting kicked out here. You're covered. Someone else has provided for you. The greatest gift has been given. You're saved. You're rescued. You're sin-free. You're forgiven. You're in. And you start to see that as the foundational reality of the universe. then you realize, wow, to have a Thanksgiving in which there's some peace, to have a good time with the kids, to have fun with relatives or friends, to have a tasty holiday treat, or to enjoy going out, driving around, looking at lights. Or it's a tremendous gift from a loving God. When you see what it could be, what humans are capable of, then all these other things, remember James 1, every good gift comes down from above, right? And it starts with God just meeting us where we are. And that's what Christmas is about. Christmas is about God down here, God meeting us where we are. Sometimes the fantasy parts, the movies we like, or even sometimes church themes that we are drawn to, it's like they appeal to that part of us that wants to escape the ugly realities of life, to ignore them or kind of just go the other way. They appeal to that part of us that wants to dig out, that wants to climb out of, to ascend a little bit, to sort of climb out of this miry, messy stuff. But the message of the gospel, the message of Christmas is not about us climbing out. It's not about us escaping. It's about God coming down and God rescuing. That's what it's about. It's about God not meeting us where we want to be, where we could be, where we should be, but God meeting us where we are. Right here where we are. And I'm finding in my life, and I'll close with this, some of my best conversations of a spiritual nature happen with other people and with my kids in the midst of what is. It's when my kids come home from school and say, Dad, I had a hard day. This kid said this, and that kid said the other thing, and that hurt my feelings, and that made me mad. And we sit and we talk about that. And we say, what does God have for us to learn right here, right now? What is he up to? What's he showing us about what we really want and about who he really is? What's he up to here? It's in the place of what is, and a big part of, if not the only message, but a big part of the message of Christmas is God sees us in what is. He came to what was there. He knew he was going to be rejected. He knew he was going to be forsaken. He knew even his closest followers would abandon him. He knew that people wouldn't honor him the way he deserved to be honored. He knew he'd be taken advantage of. He knew he'd be despised. He knew he'd be beaten. He knew he'd be crucified. He knew all that was going to happen, and he came anyway. To say to the world that God loves you. So that's why we sing joy to the world, right? It's like we don't deserve that. So this Thanksgiving we just passed, Christmas coming up. If something happens, and maybe I hope it doesn't, but if something happens where in your family there's a squabble or you're estranged from people, I've got some estrangement in my family. Yeah, look, it's okay to be sad about that, because it is sad. It's okay to say it shouldn't be that way, because in one sense, it shouldn't be that way. People shouldn't be fighting, throwing things, yelling, cursing at each other. Shouldn't be unforgiving, unwilling to let it go when those things happen, harboring resentment, turning their back on one another. Shouldn't be. But it often is. And God says, I see it. I see your real problem. Your real problem isn't horizontal, it's vertical. And I love you, and I've come for you, and I've rescued you, and I've come to live with you, and for you to live with me. And in terms of qualifications, you're good, you're in. I think in Sunday school, Don, you said it's amazing how these things fit, but you're saying it's not like God's going to parade all your worst sins before the whole world and show everybody how horrible you've been. He's a God who's quick to cover. Remember, and I promise this time I'm going to close. Remember, Joseph discovers that Mary is pregnant. And it says, and Joseph, being a righteous man, did what? dragged her out in the open square to stone her in front of everybody because of what he suspected was true of her. No, it says he covered it up and didn't tell anybody. Picture of the heart of God who just comes to cover. He comes to redeem. He comes to rescue. He comes to assure you of forgiveness and mercy. That he loves you. And that is whether we can fully appreciate it or not, is the greatest gift of all. To have your Creator reaching you like that. Let's close in prayer. God, thank you for our time thinking through some of these themes. Gives us a lot to think about and reflect on. And God, I thank you that you help us slow down, see things as they are. Without you, we're just left to our own minds and our own speculations and our own understanding of things, so skewed in so many ways. Some ways skewed pessimistically, in other ways skewed optimistically, but skewed. But you sent Christ into this world to bring light, to bring truth, to acquaint us with reality. To see ourselves for who we are as rebels, and to come in a lowly, humble way to give yourself for us, for our redemption. Help us this Christmas season, God, to see all the good gifts and to appreciate what we have. And most of all, to see the amazing nature of your heart for us, what you're like, and to truly celebrate, to be able to sing songs like Joy to the World, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, Glory to the Newborn King, the King who came to rescue us from ourselves. Thank you, God, for these truths, and thank you for the opportunity, the privilege of sharing them this morning that I've had. I pray that as we go, that we would be going in the grace and knowledge of Christ, and we'd build each other up even today in the next hour. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.